Just as Jaden was relishing a peaceful swim in his own pool, his furious neighbor suddenly called the police, accusing him of trespassing. But what made her so sure he didn't belong there? As officers arrived and tensions skyrocketed, Jaden found himself needing to prove his innocence. What happened next will leave you speechless. Jaden Thompson stood at the edge of his backyard pool, taking in a moment. It was the first real chance he had to enjoy his new home since moving in 2 weeks ago. At 27, he had worked tirelessly for this, late nights, double shifts, sacrificing weekends, all to build his tech startup from the ground up. And now, as he stood in his own backyard, a wave of pride washed over him. This was his. His dream turned reality. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. Dream big, Jay, and never let anyone make you feel small. She had passed just before he made his first million, but he knew she would be smiling down on him. This house. It was proof of both her prayers and his relentless hard work. Floating on his back, eyes closed, Jaden let himself sink into the serenity of the moment, until a sharp voice, cutting through the air like glass, shattered the peace. What do you think you're doing? Jaden's eyes flew open. Wait, before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. At the edge of his property stood an older woman, arms crossed so tightly they seemed locked in place. Her scowl deepened the harsh lines around her mouth, her sharp gaze locked onto him. Her silver hair was neatly styled, not a single strand out of place, and she wore a stiff-looking floral blouse that matched her rigid posture. I asked you a question, she barked, her voice dripping with accusation. Who are you, and why are you in that pool? Standing waist-deep in the water, Jaden blinked, confused. I'm swimming, he responded, keeping his tone as calm as possible, unsure why she was so upset. This is private property, she snapped, narrowing her eyes. You have no business being here. I'm calling the cops. Her fingers moved swiftly over her phone screen. Jaden felt his chest tighten. He swam to the edge, climbed out, water streaming from his athletic frame. Ma'am, I live here. I bought this house 2 weeks ago. Her expression only hardened. That's impossible. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. Her gaze traveled over him, lingering on his dark skin and braided hair. Jaden felt his temper rise, but forced himself to stay calm. He had faced this kind of judgment before. Stay cool, Jay. Don't give her what she wants. I'm Jaden Thompson, he said, extending a hand. I moved here from Atlanta. I own this house. She didn't take his hand. Instead, her gaze flicked between him and the pool, disbelief etched deep into her features. You own this house, she repeated slowly, as if the words themselves were foreign to her. That's exactly what I said, Jaden replied, his voice carrying a slight edge. Is there a problem? Her face flushed red. Yes, there's a problem. I don't believe you. People like you don't live here. There it was. People like you. The words hit like a slap. A surge of anger bubbled within Jaden, but he swallowed it down. Before he could say another word, she pressed a button on her phone. Yes, hello, I need the police. There's an intruder in my neighbor's pool. Yes, a young black man. He's being aggressive. Jaden's jaw dropped. Aggressive? He was standing there, calmly talking to her. She turned away, pretending not to hear him as she gave the dispatcher the address. His heart pounded. He'd heard far too many stories about situations like this ending horribly. He looked at the woman, her expression cold, unyielding. She wasn't seeing him as a homeowner, not even as a neighbor. To her, he was nothing but a threat. A mix of frustration, anger, and fear swirled inside him. He wanted to yell, to scream, but he knew that would only escalate things. Instead, he turned and walked into the house, his wet feet leaving damp footprints on the marble floor. Grabbing his phone, he quickly dialed his real estate agent. Mark, it's Jaden. My neighbor just called the cops on me for being in my own pool. A tense pause. Then Mark's voice came through, tight with concern. I'm on my way. Just stay inside. Don't do anything. Jaden hung up, looking out the window. The woman was still standing there, arms crossed, a smirk creeping onto her face. His peaceful afternoon had turned into a nightmare. And it was just getting started. Moments later, 2 police cars pulled up. Jaden's stomach twisted. The woman's smugness deepened as she waved the officers over, her voice loud enough to be heard through the glass.
Yes, he was in the pool. Trespassing.
And he was aggressive. Jaden took a deep breath. Never let fear make you small. Standing tall, he squared his shoulders and stepped outside, making sure his hands were visible. A tall officer with salt and pepper hair approached him cautiously. "Sir, we received a call about a trespasser. Can you tell us what's going on?" Jaden glanced at the woman, her arms folded, face brimming with satisfaction. "I live here," he said firmly. "This is my house. My name is Jaden Thompson. I bought this property 2 weeks ago." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof of ownership?" Jaden nodded.
"Inside."
"I'll go get it." Slowly, the officer cautioned, his hand resting near his holstered weapon. Jaden's chest tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Moving calmly, he entered the house and retrieved the folder with all the paperwork. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled out the deed, his name printed in bold letters. If you're invested in this story and want more, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Stepping back outside, he handed the documents to the officer. Meanwhile, another officer, a stern-looking woman, was questioning the neighbor. "Ma'am, did you actually see him break in?"
She huffed.
"I don't need to see anything. He doesn't belong here. I've lived next door for 20 years. No one like him has ever lived here before." Jaden's jaw clenched. "No one like him." The officer skimmed through the paperwork, then looked up, his tone firm.
"This all checks out."
"Ma'am, he owns the property. There's no crime here." The woman's face paled. That can't be. How could he afford?" She stopped mid-sentence, her gaze darting between Jaden and the officer. "There must be some mistake. People like him. I mean, it's just not possible." Jaden stepped forward, his voice steady and cold. "It is possible. I worked for this. I earned this. Just because you can't see it doesn't make it less real." Her mouth opened, then shut. Reality hit her, hard. Shoulders sagging, she turned away and hurried inside, without another word. The officer sighed, handing Jaden back his papers. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Mr. Thompson. Have a good day." As the police left, Jaden let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His home. His sanctuary. And no one was going to take that from him. With a deep breath, he dove back into the pool, letting the cool water wash it all away. The sun still shone, bright and unapologetic. Nothing, not even a racist neighbor, was going to ruin this day.